brothers and sisters and all their children were born right in the thick of it, in the mouth of genocide, thrust from the land and their very ways of being, tossed into the fast-evolving, unfamiliar world of the settlers.
That is some of a new docuseries, the trailer for The Knowing. It's a 4-part documentary series from famed Anishinaabe journalist and author Tanya Talaga from Fort William First Nation. And this is what you're going to see. TIFF audiences have already seen it, but this is what you're going to see on CBC Television and CBC Gem as of this week. It is based on a brand new book that just came out at the end of August, same name, The Knowing. And Tanya is here to talk about this, and I'm just delighted to have some more time with you. Good morning.
Good morning.
And congratulations, first of all, on the response the book is getting and the premiere. And there's such anticipation about this series, which begins on Wednesday on CBC. How are you feeling as it gets set to air?
A little bit nervous,
Yeah.
you know. It's, to say it's my life's work is true in so many ways, because my family has been searching for Annie Carpenter, and we've all been affected as a First Nations person by Indian residential schools, Indian hospitals, and, you know, to have a TV series and a book about all the things that are such a part of your life, it's pretty wild and daunting.
People should understand this. This is the nexus. It's your personal family story,
Yes.
but it is the story of Canada's residential school system as well, as you discovered when you went looking for your great-great-grandmother. Tell us about, introduce us, since she's central to all of this. Who's Annie Carpenter?
So Annie Carpenter, as you said, is my great-great-grandma, and for so long, members of my family have been trying to figure out what happened to her. She disappeared in 1930 from her home north of Lake Superior. She was living in the bush with her family, and she was gone. She was sent to a hospital in Toronto. We didn't know where she was. And for years, my Uncle Hank, my Aunt Connie, so many members of my family tried to figure out what had happened to her and also who she was. Her daughter, Liz, raised my mother. And Liz never spoke of who she was, where she was from. She had been to Indian residential school and came out basically hating herself. Was a very staunch Catholic after she left the schools, and never spoke of her mother, Annie. So it was a mystery for us, for both women. And
For 80 years in
for
your
80
family.
years, yes. And so we eventually found Annie, but it took an army of researchers to hunt through records, to find records, which so many of our families are doing right now in the hunt for their own missing family members who went to the schools or to an Indian hospital or a tuberculosis sanatorium.
The story is told in The Knowing, the book. I'm wondering, as you were writing this book, what led you to say, this must be on screen as well, this must be captured in documentary form?
Well, I'm a journalist, and it was really apparent to me that we had to record everything, you know, not just the finding of my family members, but also what was happening. I mean, Kamloops Indian Residential School, the Swaywe, the spirits of the missing, you know, the finding of 215 potential graves of children. I was a journalist, and I was out there covering that story when it first happened. I went back for the one-year memorial, and I knew we had to record this. So I grabbed a camera, literally, and a sound guy, and we recorded. We went to go visit with Kamloops Indian Residential School survivors that I had met the year before, and it just kept continuing. You know, I knew that we had to record all of us going to Rome to seek an apology from the Pope, and I wanted to record it from our eyes, from First Nations eyes, from Indigenous eyes.
Was the experience for you telling the story in documentary form different from writing the story? Will the experience of viewing it be different from the experience of reading it, do you think?
Oh, yes, I think so. I think so. You see more in the 4-part series, and I was able to go longer and explore different things that I didn't do in the book. In the book is split actually into 4 books, and the first book itself is very much into history. Because when I was finding Annie, I realized I had to dissect and retell Canadian history as most people know it. I wanted to tell it through the eyes of an Indigenous person, through me, and what our families lived through. And so the book is a definite different experience than the series. The series, you see everything. You see the beauty, too, of our land and of our rivers.
It is a companion, as we say, companion docuseries. And we were just talking before coming on the air. You're going to see things that you've never seen before. It's rare archival footage, but some of it has not ever been
That's
or
right.
not before, but in decades.
That's right. So Joan Metatwabin, who is Edmund Metatwabin's partner, his wife, she ran into the burning St. Anne's Indian Residential School and grabbed all she could. And one of the things she grabbed was a reel of 16 millimeter film, and she brought it home. And when we were shooting in Petobic, Fort Albany last year, she gave it to us and she said, I don't know what's on here, but here you go. And so we digitized it, and we could not believe it what we saw. We saw from 50 years ago, the ice breakup of the Fort Albany, of the Albany River, Kistashawon. We saw, as you've been seeing it this morning too, priests arriving on float plane and walking up to the old St. Anne's Indian Residential School.
That's part of the trailer.
That's right.
And then, so Edmund, you mentioned Metatwabin. He also, we meet your great-great-grandmother in the first episode. We meet Edmund in the first episode. A little bit of one of the interviews you did with him. Let's listen to that, and then we'll talk about him further.
There was one community here at the old post. One people speaking one language. And then the Anglicans and Jesuits and Catholics showed up and divided the community in half. They saw the potential for hydro development. Not for us, but for them. And that's where they started developing lumbering to build their schools. They built St. Anne's. And there's no more renewal of life. So it's the price we pay.
So that is part of the first of 4 episodes in The Knowing, and that is, again, Edmund, listening to his story as he was telling it to you. Obviously, you're very somber. How did you receive his story, and how is it emblematic of that which we're going to see over the course of the documentary?
You know, it's just wild. I've known Edmund and his brother Mike. Both are survivors of St. Anne's Indian Residential School for almost 15 years. I knew them as a journalist. And so when I started looking for Annie, and I knew there were carpenters along the James Bay coast, I reached out to Mike, and he and Edmund helped me. They invited me back to Petobic, Fort Albany, and I went looking for any traces of Annie Carpenter relations. And it's so important to tell Edmund and Mike's story as well, because they are survivors of St. Anne's, but they're all still seeking justice. They are still seeking themselves and other survivors to have fairness brought to their cases, to have recognition about what happened to them and to other survivors. And they're still fighting with Canada. Canada has not settled with them and accepted their stories.
The 4 parts, The Knowing, Stolen Children, Part 3 is Lost, Found, and Lost Again. And then the 4th and concluding part is called The End is the Beginning. You do find your great-great-grandmother in the end. I won't give away too much of the story because we'll want people to... But you find her grave, which is something that your family is able to have that so many families do not have that.
Yes.
How is it then the beginning for your family and for the country?
The end is the beginning is circular. You know, as an Anishinaabe person, I believe in life and the continuum of life, and everything that goes around comes around, right? And this is the beginning. There is truth-telling that needs to be told in this country, and this is just one woman's story. The finding of Annie has led to the finding of 32 other First Nations people in the same grave, unmarked grave, and it is in the city of Toronto.
You've been driving by it for years.
For years. It's shocking and unbelievable, but it's true. This country was built on our people, literally, figuratively. We are still here, but we have been here for so long. And I think that people will understand Annie's story to be emblematic of all of the children, too, that went missing in Indian residential schools. All of our community members that got lost in the sanatoriums, that died and were never returned home, or the Indian hospitals. Yes, she was not a child, but she was a woman who was near to my age when she was taken away, and we never heard from her again. And then this is where she died.
It's the erasure.
Yes, that's
the disappearance of and that's. I wish we had more and more time, because even the title of the book in the series, The Knowing, it's so simple, but it's so haunting in what it means. And so I would invite you to watch, read, and see, because you're off on a national book tour. And
yes.
That will be, you're steeling yourself for that too. If you happen to be in Toronto today at Kerner Hall tonight with Mark Sakamoto, you're going to have a question and answer. That'll be a very important night as well in Toronto. But best of luck with all of it. Such an important conversation to have with you every time you visit, and I appreciate it. Thanks, Tanya. See you again. The Knowing premieres on Wednesday, CBC Television and CBC Gem. It's at 8 p.m. Eastern, 8:30 in Newfoundland.